Good evening, friends. Welcome to this edition of the Mystery Wine Blind Tasting. I'm Neal Wavra, your host here at Field & Main Restaurant this evening with this deep, opulent, opaque beauty. Just poured on my side. If you've poured yourself a glass and are here to play, let me know. If you haven't got this wine in front of you but still want to play, we welcome you. What are we playing? The Mystery Wine Game, of course. This is a game that uses a deductive process to assess what's in this glass and try to figure out what it might be. So we're going to smell the wine, we're going to taste the wine, but before we do any of that, we're going to just observe the wine. So if you're here and observing this wine, or if you're online and want to play along with the visual, please do so. Let me know you're here, and I'm interested to hear your thoughts on this number. Dean and Baba, good evening. Hello, hello. And happy equinox to you too. Yes, that sounds great. Ready for some longer days, right? Some sunshine, some springtime. Sarah, welcome. Thank you for playing from Pennsylvania. If you're just joining us too and you haven't played along before, we have patrons who decide to take these bottles all around the country and sometimes further afield than that. So wonderful to have you with us. Sarah, Julie. Wow, that's fascinating, huh? Deep, dark color. I was just talking about a California Mourvedre to a table downstairs who was dining. And so my immediate thought with this color and darkness echoes the idea of a Mourvedre from California. I have no idea if that's the case, but it's in the running because of the color, the deep, rich color here. So all the way to the rim. I quite agree, Dean. This is a very seriously dark wine. It poured out rich. Sometimes even when you're pouring a wine, right, you can tell that there's a little bit of light reflecting through it. And then when it gets in the glass, it gains a little bit of opacity. But in this case, no such luck as it was pouring. It was really rich all the way through, deep ruby color, just as Julie was noting. It cannot read through it, cannot see through it. It does not present the ability to see anything from behind it. Which is an indication of certain types of grapes, right? So if we said all that we just said about this wine, deep, ruby, rich, opaque, Pinot Noir, I think, is the grape. Less likely, because it would usually be something that's on the lighter end of the spectrum if it was Pinot Noir. This is quite opposite. So right off the bat, we can start thinking about richer, more bold grapes that present wines that have this kind of color to it and this kind of intensity. And oftentimes, as we've talked about, when it's in the middle, it becomes more challenging because there's a lot more options. When it's on one end of the spectrum, very light or very rich like this one, you start to be able to weed out some things. So if it's very rich, very dark, you can say it's not the lighter varietals like Gamay or Pinot Noir, for example. Saint Laurent from Austria, things of that sort wouldn't be in the running for this. We already know a bunch about this wine without even having smelled it or tasted it. What might it be? Well, it's like I said, maybe Mourvedre, maybe a blend of Mourvedre and Syrah and Grenache, maybe what else? Tannat, Petit Verdot, varietals that have real intensity. There's a little bit of a, are you getting kind of a little bit of that? Well, it's slightly purplish around the outside. It's more about that deep ruby, but there's a hint of that kind of a purple fleck to it. But the red is really deep ruby, absolutely. So almost as dark as port. Yeah, let's get to that part of the visual analysis too, as you reference viscosity. So give the wine a swirl, of course, and look at where you land at the top level of where your swirl went. What's happening from that standpoint? Is it starting to create a tear that runs down, that forms a leg? Man, are they moving slow. Yes, viscosity is high. So potential alcohol very high, or some residual sugar perhaps. Don't know that just yet until you taste it, but there is intensity there. Wow. They're really slow forming tears, and then they are taking their time running down the glass. And they are maintaining a fairly persistent leg for a period of time. So this has some real richness to it. What does that mean? A riper climate, higher alcohol production, something that has a substantial growing season and can get pretty ripe. So deep, dark ruby. We've got that viscosity, a warmer climate, powerful kind of thick-skinned, something tannic and powerful is what I'm anticipating as we kind of get into the smell and taste of this wine. So let's smell the wine. Tell me what you get. Few things: fruit, earth, and wood. What do you pick up? Ooh, it's heady. Ah, man, that's wonderful. It's meaty, isn't it? There's that sort of, sweet spice. Gosh, getting sucked into the nose there. Dean, thank you for pulling me back out with a good question. Not much of a clear rim doesn't mean lower alcohol. Not necessarily. I mean, that's an indication sometimes that clear rim would be, but you're right. It kind of goes pure color right to the rim. Maybe it's a little bit more moderate in alcohol, but the indication here would be that would be a little bit higher in alcohol, but we'll see. Dried dates and figs, so some dried fruit, real concentrated fruit, advanced fruit character, some wood for sure, and that sweet spice. It's like that cedar box. I don't know. It's like a barnyard in a sauna, warm cedar and some of that barnyardy animal. Fig, definitely fig, which Julie's picking up. Gravel and graphite. There's a lot, isn't there? It's an expressive wine. So oftentimes we're talking a little bit about wines that are more muted or hard to parse out because they are not quite giving. This is quite the opposite, isn't it? It has a lot of expression in the nose. Cranberry, herbal elements, spice notes, cinnamon and cedar. That's that sweet spice coming out. I would kind of think of cinnamon as a sweet spice, principally because it's a spice that's associated with things that end up being sweet. But yeah, I say use the word heady, but this heady mix of where that sweet aroma mixes with that earthy quality, mixes with that animal element, mixes with that fruit. These are parts that can be contrasting, but they're sort of singing in a makeshift harmony at this point, which is really kind of cool. And that sort of smoky note that Julie's picking up on, I think that's oaky elements, but yeah. So we're describing that meaty, smoky element. I think you can't not kind of consider something like Syrah in that conversation. Maybe it's that Syrah, Grenache, Mourvedre, or Syrah blend too as an option. So right off the nose, we're starting to kind of frame an idea here, but it's not necessarily set in stone. We'll come to more of an understanding as we taste the wine, but it fits with the profile of what we saw visually. Maybe even a little bit too viscous for Syrah. It's a bit darker than a lot of Syrah, right? Some pure Syrah would be a little bit lighter in presentation, color-wise, and intensity. Maybe a Shiraz, but I've never smelled a Shiraz that has that kind of earthy element. So could be a Southern Rhone kind of blend that has Mourvedre to it, so it gives it a little more inky color, and some Syrah mixed in, and some Grenache, but I'm not positive there. Lots of low alcohol. It's still thinking low alcohol because it doesn't hit when it swirls. Yeah, it doesn't have that sort of element of burn in the high alcohol camp. It is something that, for sure, though, the alcohol esters are releasing, and they're bringing with them quite a few aromas. Old vine Zinfandel, old vine Primitivo, absolutely, right? So Southern Italy, Primitivo, Puglia perhaps, Zinfandel, California in the running by way of color for sure. By way of aromatics, this would be an awesome Zin from California if it had those aromatics. Okay. Well, let's taste the wine and see where it takes us. Let's do taste before we do flavor first, right? And what's the distinction? Taste is what you perceive on your tongue. Sweet, sour, salty, bitter, umami. There's a new Japanese taste, or new Japanese term for taste that's an amplifying flavor, and I'm blanking on the term. I think it's kokumi or something like that. But in the case of wine, typically we're talking about either sweetness, sourness, sometimes a perception of sort of a salinity, but maybe a bitterness and that tannic element coming through. High tannin, yep, Julie, that's there, and the acidity. So high tannin would be, someone was here last night for our wine dinner with the Pei family wines, and Brooke was the presenter, and she described tannin as little sweaters for your teeth. And so there's some quality of that. I used to kind of call it the cotton ball stuck up between your gums, but I like the little sweaters for your teeth. This has some of those little sweaters. The acidity is where? And the robustness of the wine is light, medium, or robust. Where's the acidity? Where's the tannin? Robustness. Where's the dryness? Is it one that is off dry, or is it a dry wine? And wow, that's quite a ride down the palate, isn't it? Ooh, the tannin's really prominent. I would say that's medium plus high tannin. High tannin, like those little sweaters are there. Actually, there's a sweater for the tongue too. It's all over. In that context, there's acidity. I'm still salivating, so it's pretty medium plus acidity too, I think. It's got a fair amount. There's a little bit of bitterness on the back end of this. Wow. It's rich, right, on the palate by way of the tannin, which almost outpaces the body and adds an element of structure to the body. The core of the wine, if you will, the core that's wrapped with that tannin is maybe a little bit medium plus in body, but overall we're in a medium plus for sure kind of camp on the wine side to robust. I mean, this is a big wine. Sicilian, Sarah, I think is an absolute option. That ashy note, that smoky note, maybe we're talking about something like Nero d'Avola, but really rich. I mean, it's got brutish tannin in this case. Dean and Bob and I love that note. The aroma seems more complex than the taste. It's hard to get past the tannin, really, to get more complexity. It might be there. This wine needs to soften. Give it a really good swirl. As we spend some time with this wine, we'll see how it opens up and see if we can kind of crush our way through a little bit of it, because it right now is presenting mostly as tannin. Like I'm very much wanting something rich and flavorful, something with fat or rareness to just help to temper some of that tannin so I can get to the rest of the wine. It has power. Some kind of stone. Anybody else tasting a stony note per Julie's comment there? Graphite, slate, ash, something that is volcanic, maybe, thinking about Etna or thinking about Sicily. Yours is still pretty tannic, Dean, even open after 2 hours. That's pretty amazing. This was open from my side. It was opened 15 minutes ago. And so it is still very, very tannic. I'm going to keep swirling. This is a type of wine from your perspective at home. If you open this at home and you don't love those tannins and you don't have anything necessarily paired to plan with this, if you can cook something with a little bit of rareness, if you can offer something with a little bit of fat, this will help soften that tannin. Decanting absolutely would help this wine. So and forcibly decanting too. Like you're not just kind of easing it and glug it in there. Like let it aerate and swirl and give it some real aeration and movement. Some people argue that you should or you can put this type of wine in a blender and spin it and really aerate it. I'm uncomfortable with that idea. So I'm not advocating for that, but I'm sure it might add a dimension of air, but that sort of seems to me counterintuitive to really beating up a wine. But let's think then about where this might be from, right? So where is it from and what potential varietals should we consider? Where can you get a big, bold wine? And then that backs us into some varietals. And that's a great way to think about it, right? So you can get a big, bold wine if we're starting in this country on the West Coast in California for sure. You can get a big, bold wine in Washington, right? You can get a big, bold wine, less so here in Virginia, maybe in Arizona, a bigger, bold wine. If we went to South America, for sure, right? You can get some in Argentina. I would be hard pressed to think this is Chilean, just because I associate a certain level, even of intensity in Chilean wines, with an elegance. There's sort of a silkiness to those wines, and I'd be surprised. Where else can you get a big, bold wine? South Africa, for sure, and Australia. And then as we head into the old world, man, I just caught your note, Julia. A well pan-seared steak. You put herbs in that butter as you're pan-searing it, and you're kind of basting the steak with the butter and the herbs, some peppercorns, a couple cloves of garlic. Absolutely. And you get a nice crust on the outside and rare almost, or medium rare on the inside. That would be lovely with this. Bobbin, I echo the puffy coat. Yes, it's filling there, and it's almost lumbering in a way. It's kind of, it has muted the ability of the tongue to pick up and perceive more than just the tannin. Tannat absolutely is an option, Sarah, for sure. And I think, some Uruguayan Tannat, even though they are a little bit softer. So Tannat for me is absolutely in the running here. And we're talking about southwestern France and Mataran here for Tannat. For that matter, Malbec from southwestern France and Cahors would be another option. There's that gripping, powerful tannin in both those places. And so I think that's absolutely in the running. Dean, I haven't been to Chile, so I take your point there, and I think that's great. From some of the table wines you had, so rusticity to them, a lack of polish. Spain absolutely could have a big, bold wine. Southern Italy, we've touched on already, absolutely. Less so Austria for me. I mean, even Blaufränkisch, for example, has sort of almost a Merlot-like character too, but I don't associate this grip of tannin there. Same for Germany. So we kind of have worked our way around the world, haven't we? I mean, Greece, like Xinomavro, really ripe, powerful. Portugal for sure. Thank you. Eastern Europe. I was just emailing with a gentleman who is going to send us some samples at some point of some Eastern European wine. I think Georgian wines. What is that? That's Saperavi. Those wines can be a little bit lighter and a touch more delicate, but I also have tried some that are pretty powerful and rich. I don't think Saperavi typically is a lighter wine per se, but it has a richness to it. So something like that. So we've got a lot of options for around the world. And let's see if we can start chipping away at either what we think it might be or really what it isn't in order to eliminate some options and then help us to zero in. Do you think this is Californian? Ooh. Yeah, now there's like a smoky, like burning herb. I would be hard pressed to place this in California just for the intrigue of the nose and some of those earthy, meaty notes. So I'm gonna rule out California for me. Same kind of goes for Washington. Despite the comment about sort of the table wines in Chile, that's kind of out for me. I don't think that this level of tannin would be something you'd have as expressively in, say, Argentina with a Malbec from there. So I'm not in South America really. Potential for South Africa. And like I said, on the Shiraz side in Australia, I don't think that tannin and this deep, rich color would be there. The deep, rich color you could get, I've had those inky, black kind of Shirazes, 15.5, 16%. It's not presenting that alcohol in the back of the palate or on the nose the same way. So I might take that out of the running. And typically those wines too also present sort of this cocoa cherry situation, which I'm not getting here. It's much more about that herbal note, that wild note, that earth note. Egri Bicover, do tell more. I don't know anything about that. Mediterranean southern France, I'm very comfortable with that idea in the context of Maturin, Cahors, something else perhaps, but sort of that Tannat, really grippy, powerful. Tannat is a comfortable place for me, I think, on this one. Like I think about Maturin in the same way I think a little bit about Chinon and the Loire Cab Franc. So in Loire Cab Franc, you get that sort of tannic, astringent, slightly herbal element that I think you get also in this sort of wild, less refined Tannat version in Maturin. So oh, wow. Yeah, I just want to keep smelling that. The fig and the herbal element, the stone, that all lines up with sort of with that sunshiny, warm Mediterranean element, the Iberian Peninsula. So Spain and Italy are still in the running. Spain and southern France, Italy, southern Italy, either in the arch, the heel, the foot of the boot, or maybe across into Sicily too. So France, Italy, Spain are still in the running. We can take out, I think, Australia and South Africa. Oh, Hungarian. Oh, thank you. Yeah, I've had that that once. The bull's blood. That's the note. Thank you. Yeah, it was pretty powerful. It was tannic. That's not so Eastern European, Hungarian, excuse me, and maybe a Georgian wine. I love the way to play the game too when you're using your own reference points, which are your own tastes, right? So Bobbin's ruling out Tannat because she doesn't like Tannat and she likes this. Good, right? So there's something to be a tell there that the rest of us don't have at our disposal because we don't have your taste, but we can utilize your perspective and reference, right? We can also be wrong in that and find that there is actually a variety, a variant of the variety we thought we didn't like that we end up liking, but given that this is a challenging wine that doesn't exactly represent what I think it might be, you know, it's something I can obviously pick out, using whatever you have at your disposal is important. So trying this again, I'm getting black licorice. Anybody else? That's what's coming out more in this medicinal herbal element. It's black licorice. Ooh, now it's like stewed beans, lentils. Like you've been stewing the beans and you take the lid off the pot and all of that sort of aroma and trapped sort of sulfuric element of those beans just. So Bobbin, are you saying you're saying that this is not Tannat because you don't like Tannat and you like this? Sarah, are you saying you love Tannat and you don't like this, and so it's Tannat? Aldianico, thank you. Yeah, southern France or southern Italy there too. Campagna, perhaps. That could be a very tannic wine. Okay, so maybe Georgia, maybe Hungary, southern Italy, Spain, and France. France, we're talking about maybe Tannat, but it sounds like we're kind of weeding that one out, perhaps. What do we think this might be from Spain? What could this be from Spain if it is a Spanish red? like the classics, right? The things we've tried, Ribera del Duero, so Tempranillo, and the productions of Tempranillo in Rioja. I don't think either of those. That there's a quality about both those wines typically that are more resolved in tannin than this rich, right? So Monastrell, Mencia has a really grippy kind of tannin quality too, but I don't think this rich. Boy, it would be a very big Mencia. There's a quality about Mencia that I associate with being sort of a cross between Nebbiolo and Pinot Noir. Yeah, so I don't know about that. I don't know that I could comfortably like place this in Spain because I just don't know the reference point. So for me, Spain's sort of out. That lentil stewed bean licorice. Maybe southern Italy. I don't have enough experience with Saperavi or with bull's blood Hungarian wines to be able to call anything there. But I'm remembering now that bull's blood, a friend brought that wine over. We tried it, and yeah, it was funky. It had herbal notes and meaty notes and savory notes, and so I kind of like that. But that's a very uneducated guess in terms of what it would be specifically and from where. It's more like I can't identify the clarity of what this wine is referencing Mataran, the Rhone, Rioja, Tempranillo lands in Spain, southern Italy, even Nero d'Avola. Man, this tannin is persistent and sort of a little underripe. I wouldn't put anything past Julie if she found something cool. Margarita pizza nice, Italian sausage absolutely would be helpful. Like that would grip and soften some of the tannin a little bit. I agree, Gail. But I imagine just some of that kind of acidity and brightness from the tomato and the margarita would be helpful, and the cheese in particular would help soften some of this tannin. If you have sort of full fat mozzarella, that would be whole milk based mozzarella would be really great. Okay. So what do we think? Pour a touch more, see if it changes again. We're at 30 minutes with this particular wine, which is about the time that things have changed, evolved enough for us to get somewhere specific. Ooh, a good grilled cheeseburger would be fantastic. Yeah, that would be wonderful. A little bit of char, maybe some pickles and some of that, some melted cheese, and some rareness on that burger. This would work out well. Okay, so 30 minutes in, some of the tannins are softening. Sagrantino. Nice. Yep. Southern Italy, Aglianico, Nero d'Avola, something of that sort. Sagrantino. That's a great call. I like that too. Yeah, it's. Would this work with an umami burger? Sure, of course. Everything works with an umami burger. You're not going to hear me not recommend an umami burger for everything. Southern Italy. I like that call. But I'm puzzling for lack of a better way of saying it, is sort of that stewed bean element. I can get around some of this rustic tannin, this power, the fig element. But I can't quite place that kind of anise element. That could be Italy, the black licorice. I can get there. So yeah, Southern Italy. Part of me just wants to kind of go Eastern Europe, just because I want to be contrarian and not know, not knowing enough to know, am I making a really truly educated guess versus just sort of I'm going to put my egg in a different basket because everybody has the right basket. But yeah, Greece too. Yeah, I mean, there's the ripeness to this, but there's like a restrained element. There's that astringent quality to some of the tannin too. So all right, I'm still working here and puzzling, and I'm not sure. So Southern Italy, I think that's a very good way to be. Let's see. All right. You gotta plan a guess. You gotta actually plant a flag. So I'm saying something Eastern European. There's just the quality of tannin. And look at my teeth; they're like purple. But I like the Southern Italian idea here too. So I think this is young. We saw no rim variation. We had real richness all the way through, a consistent color. The tannins obviously are quite youthful. Nothing's dropped out in the way of color. So we're like 2 to 4 years of age, which would put us, oh my gosh, at 23, 22. So I'd say about 2022, 2023. Red, like a bull's blood, like a Saperavi, something in that realm. But boy, I can easily see a host of Italian reds being an option too. Look at that. What does that say? How about that fun? That's pretty cool. This is a Georgian wine. Chateau Macrani. Very cool. 2020. So that's that youthful, 5 years old. Imagine how much life this wine has. This has super staying power. This looks like it's 100% Saperavi. Wow. It dates back to 1878. Am I feeling smug? No, because I don't. Well, maybe a little bit. This wine, I wouldn't have nailed that. I wasn't confident in that. When you said Hungarian wine, I was like, oh, Eastern Europe, and even further into Georgia, right? So, but that's not by way of knowledge, right? That's not by way of like, I have experience there because I just don't have enough. But there was something about this that I couldn't place in the other places we were doing it. And so I lobbed it into that spot. Yeah, that's fascinating wine. The black licorice thing is now really coming out for me. I have to say I hate black licorice to eat, but I really like it in the nose of a wine, evidently. And I've only had with you, Sarah. I mean, I hadn't had Saperavi more than a handful of times in my life, certainly no more than 10 times in my life. And some of those were variations from New York. And so they are not prototypical versions. And so it's really neat to try one, but to be able to extrapolate, is this very typical? Is this the style? We have one guest who used to work quite a bit there and would come back with suitcases of stuff. And he would tell me stories about the wines from there and how they're big and bold and power. This is kind of in his wheelhouse, I would imagine, by way of his description. So, but I haven't had that kind of experience. So it's neat to try something like this here with all of you. I think, would Julie try to do something unique and different? Yes, she's proven that she would. Listan Negra, for example. Why not Saperavi? That's very cool. So do you like it? Do you like that tannic experience? A couple of you seem to intimate this is not like what you thought it would be by way of a different varietal, but you kind of liked what it experienced here. Julie, I've tried a couple Saperavis from up in the Finger Lakes and nothing like this. They're like more tart, a little bit leaner, a little bit wonky. And I don't know, again, like in evaluating a wine from even the Finger Lakes of Saperavi, is this what Saperavi should taste like? I haven't gotten the impression that it was doing perfectly well, and it certainly didn't drive me to want to try it again. And I'm not someone who personally typically loves tannin to this degree to have as a wine that I would enjoy. Absolutely could pair it and find a way to enjoy it. But I'm finding myself more and more compelled by this, mostly because of this experience in tasting with you. I like the experience of going through the evaluating process with all of you and hearing your thoughts, and that takes me somewhere else, helps me to appreciate the wine in a different way, which I thank all of you for. I'm grateful for the experience to do this with you each and every month. This wine, I think you could just let this sit out for till tomorrow in the glass and see what happens. I have to imagine that there'll be still some tannin in the morning, right? Yeah, I mean, it would be also fascinating to put a bottle or two like this away and leave it for 5 or 10 years. I agree. Seeing what would age and how this wine would continue to evolve would be fascinating. Wow. Fascinating wine. I'm kind of enraptured by it. So thank you all. What a fun treat. I don't know if we'll be pouring Saperavi. I think probably not at our spring wine buying events, which will be toward the end of April. That date is open in our reservation system. If you're interested in coming down on a Saturday afternoon and tasting a series of wines with us, we'll have 16 to 20 wines. We're working on that selection now. We've got a number of them picked out already that are lovely. So that's the next event on our horizon by way of wine. And of course, we'll do another mystery wine blind tasting on the third Thursday of the month of April. We'll also do an event with Jim Law and Linden Vineyards on May 1st, which we're very much looking forward to. We're going to talk a little bit about what he is doing, and Jonathan and his daughter, Samantha, and her husband are doing on the vineyard by way of new plantings. And we're going to focus on Fiano to start for our seminar, and then we'll taste Linden wines with dinner. So, oh, hey, Amy, welcome. Amy's one of our distributors and just a fantastic wealth of wine knowledge. Is it Quevri? I don't know, Amy. I do not know. Chateau Mukrani has been crafting the finest wines of Georgia. It says opulent and color, bouquet of blueberry. I don't see a note that tells you if it's in Quevri. Quevri, for those that don't know, is an earthenware kind of crock, if you will. Think about it as a pot that is buried in the earth, and the wine is fermented in Quevri and underground, not buried. The vessel top is still accessible at the surface, but it's maintained underground for temperature fluctuation. And oftentimes they're putting the whole cluster of grapes into that Quevri and allowed it to ferment slowly over time. And that's where you're going to get some of that tannin and some of that astringency, that bitterness, right? We got to pick up a little bit of that coming from some of the stems, which makes a lot of sense. These wines are very good for you. They've got a lot of the beneficial characteristics of tannin. No doubt about that. This wine has it in spades. So, oh, Sarah and Julia, you guys are coming down for that? Oh, that'll be great. Celebrating Sarah's birthday. I look forward to seeing you guys then, and hopefully more of you as well. If not, we'll see you another point here at Field, Maine, and for sure in April for our next Mystery Wine Blind tasting. Thank you so much for spending the evening with me.